The call came on a Thursday afternoon at 2:17, and it was my son-in-law's number on the screen, and I almost did not answer it because Derek and I had been in a difficult place for several months, and his calls had taken on a quality that I had started to dread in the specific way you dread things that carry bad news in their frequency and their timing. But I answered, and the voice on the other end was not Derek. It was a woman who identified herself as a nurse at Mercy Regional, and who told me that my daughter Cassandra had been brought in following a fall at her home, and that she was stable, but that they wanted family present, and that I should come as soon as I could. I was in my car in 11 minutes. I drove the 22 miles to the hospital with the particular focused calm that I have developed over 69 years of being a person who does not panic in emergencies, but who uses the energy of urgency to sharpen rather than scatter. Cassandra was in a room on the second floor, and she was sitting up in the bed when I came in, which told me immediately that whatever had happened was not the worst version of what it could have been. She had a bandage on her left forearm and a bruise developing along her cheekbone, and she looked at me when I walked in with the expression of a woman who was both relieved to see her father and frightened of something she had not yet said out loud. I sat beside her bed, I took her hand, I said, "Tell me what happened." She looked at the door, then she looked at me. She said very quietly, "Dad, it wasn't an accident." I did not move, I did not change my expression. I said, "I know," she said. "How do you know?" I said, "Because 3 weeks ago I installed a camera system in your house, and I have been watching the footage since your number came up as a missed call this morning." The room was very quiet. Then Cassandra said, "Dad," and I said, "I know, sweetheart, I have everything, all of it." And I did. My name is Leonard Graves. I am 69 years old. I was born in Birmingham, Alabama, the second of 4 children raised by a father who worked as an electrician for 38 years, and a mother who kept the house and raised 4 children and managed the household finances with the precision of a trained accountant, which she was not, but which she might as well have been. I inherited my father's practical skills and my mother's precision, and spent my career applying both in the field of commercial security systems, first as an installer in my 20s, then as a supervisor, then as the owner of a regional security installation and monitoring company that I built over 26 years and sold 6 years ago at the age of 63 for a figure that represented 3 decades of disciplined work and careful reinvestment. I know security systems the way my father knew electrical wiring, not as a specialty, but as a language. And when a man who speaks that language fluently develops a concern about the safety of the person he loves most in the world, he does not wait for confirmation of the concern before acting on it. He installs a camera system on a Tuesday afternoon 3 weeks before a Thursday phone call, and he says nothing to anyone about having done it, and he monitors the footage each morning with the same quiet attention he has brought to everything for 69 years. I had been concerned about Derek for 8 months before the call. The footage confirmed what the concern had been trying to tell me. Cassandra was my youngest child and the one who had always carried the most of her mother in her, the same directness, the same loyalty, the same tendency to see the best version of the people she loved, and to maintain that version in her understanding of them long past the point where the evidence justified the maintenance. She was 38 years old and had been with Derek Simmons for 6 years and married to him for 3 and had 2 children with him, a boy named Marcus, who was 4, and a girl named Lily, who was 2. Derek worked in auto sales and had the quality of a man who was good at selling things, including himself, and who had sold Cassandra a version of himself in the first 2 years of their relationship that had been compelling enough to produce a marriage before the version had fully revealed its inaccuracies. I had seen the inaccuracies developing. I had said what I could say without pushing Cassandra away from me and toward Derek, which is the calculation that parents of adult children in difficult relationships make, and that does not always produce the right result, but that represents the best available option in most cases. 8 months before the Thursday call, I had seen something at their house during a family dinner that had shifted my concern from the category of general worry into the category of specific alarm. I will not describe it in full detail out of respect for Cassandra's privacy. I will tell you that what I saw was physical in nature, and that it was directed at Cassandra, and that Derek did not know I had seen it, and that I drove home that evening and sat in my study for 2 hours, and then called a friend. The friend I called was Howard Reese, who had been my chief installer for 14 years before I sold the company, and who had stayed in the business, and who was the most technically skilled person I had ever worked with in 3 decades of security installation. I told Howard what I had seen and what I was concerned about and what I wanted to do. Howard said, "Leonard, when do you want to go in?" I said the following Tuesday when Cassandra was at work and Derek was at the dealership. Howard said he would be there. I called Cassandra on Monday, and told her I wanted to come by Tuesday to fix the loose hinge on the back gate that I had noticed at the dinner, and that I would need to get into the garage for tools. She said the key was under the mat, which it always was because Cassandra had not changed her habits from the years when her house was a place that did not require careful security thinking. Howard and I were there for 3 hours on Tuesday. We installed 6 cameras, interior and exterior, all of them integrated into a monitoring system that fed to an app on my phone and to a secure cloud storage account that I accessed from my home office. The cameras were placed by a man who had spent 26 years thinking about where cameras needed to be to capture what was actually happening in a space, and the placement was correct in the specific technical sense that professionals mean when they say correct. I told Cassandra nothing. Howard told no one. I checked the footage every morning for 3 weeks. Most mornings, there was nothing that added to what I already knew. On the Thursday morning before the call, I watched footage from the previous evening, and I saw something that made me pick up my phone and call Cassandra's number. She did not answer. 40 minutes later, the hospital called. I am going to tell you what the footage showed, and I am going to tell it plainly because plain telling is the only honest way to describe something that was not ambiguous, and that did not require interpretation. And that was captured from 2 different angles with the audio quality that current security systems produce when they are installed by someone who knows what he is doing. The footage from the Wednesday evening before the Thursday call showed Derek and Cassandra in an argument that began in the kitchen at 8:47 and escalated over 14 minutes. It showed Derek moving toward Cassandra in a way that was not ambiguous. It showed Cassandra moving backward toward the staircase. It showed the moment of contact. It showed Cassandra falling. It showed Derek standing at the bottom of the staircase for 43 seconds without going to her. Then it showed him picking up his phone. Then it showed him going to her. Then it showed him on the phone, speaking, and based on the timeline, the call was to a friend of his, not to emergency services, which were called 11 minutes later. I watched this footage 4 times. I did not watch it more than 4 times because 4 times was sufficient to know what it showed, and because watching it more than 4 times was not something I was going to ask myself to do. I saved it to 3 separate locations. I sent a copy to Howard. I sent a copy to my attorney, a woman named Adiz Osa who had handled my business legal matters for 16 years and who I called at 7 in the morning and who listened to a 3-minute summary and said, "Leonard, I need that footage and I need it today." I sent it before I drove to the hospital. Derek was at the hospital when I arrived. He was in the hallway outside Cassandra's room with a coffee cup and the expression of a man performing concern with the competence of someone who had performed it before. He saw me coming down the hallway, and his expression made a small adjustment that I noticed and filed. He said, "Leonard, I'm so glad you're here. It was such a terrible accident." She just lost her footing on the stairs. I looked at him for a moment. I said, "Where were you when it happened?" He said he had been in the kitchen and had heard her fall. I said, "Did you call for help right away?" He said, "Immediately, of course." I said, "Derek, I am going to go in and see my daughter now." I went into the room. I closed the door. I sat beside Cassandra and I took her hand and I told her what I had told her, that I had installed the cameras and that I had the footage and that it was already with my attorney. She cried, not dramatically, not the performing kind of crying that situations like this sometimes produce in people who are still managing how they appear, but the real kind, the kind that comes from somewhere underneath years of holding something alone and finally being able to put it down because someone else is holding it with you. I held her hand. I did not tell her what to do. I told her that everything she needed was already being handled and that she did not need to be strong for anyone in that room and that her father was there and was not going anywhere. She said, "How long have you known?" I said, "Long enough." She said, "Why didn't you say something?" I said, "Because you needed to be ready and I needed to have something solid before I came to you with it." She looked at me. She said, "You planned this." I said, "I prepared for this. There is a difference." She understood the difference because she is my daughter. Adiz Osa had the footage by 9 in the morning and had reviewed it by 11 and had called me by 11:15 with the specific calm of an attorney who has reviewed something significant and has already begun thinking about the structure of what happens next. She said, "Leonard, this footage is clear and it is time-stamped and it is stored in a manner that establishes its integrity. This is the kind of evidence that changes the trajectory of a case." She told me what options were available and I want to describe them because the sequence matters. The first option was immediate. Adiz contacted the hospital's social work department and provided a summary of the situation that triggered a mandatory reporting protocol and ensured that the hospital's documentation of Cassandra's injuries included the proper categorization rather than the accidental fall characterization that Derek had established. The second option involved law enforcement. Adi's firm had a relationship with a domestic violence unit detective, a woman named Officer Patricia Chen, who had been working these cases for 12 years, and who met with Adi's and me that same afternoon in a conference room at Adi's office. I showed Officer Chen the footage. She watched it twice. She asked me 4 questions. Then she said, "Mr. Graves, I want to talk to your daughter." Cassandra was still at the hospital. Officer Chen went to the hospital. The conversation between Officer Chen and Cassandra lasted 2 hours, and I was not in the room for it because Cassandra needed to make her own decisions with proper support rather than in the presence of her father, and that was the right structure for that conversation. When Officer Chen came out, she looked at me and said, "Your daughter is ready to move forward." Those were the 5 most important words I heard that week. Derek did not know about the cameras until Officer Chen and a colleague came to the dealership on Friday morning with a warrant and a tablet showing the footage. I know the details of that morning because Officer Chen described them to me afterward in the professional summary she provided. Derek had been in a sales meeting when the officers arrived. He had come out of the meeting with the confidence of a man who believed the previous night's conversation in the hospital hallway had established the narrative and that the narrative was solid. He had looked at the tablet. He had watched the footage. His attorney, who arrived 20 minutes later, told him not to say anything, and Derek had followed that advice, which was the correct legal response and which was also, from my perspective, irrelevant because the footage did not require Derek's commentary to establish what it showed. The arrest followed the framework that Officer Chen and Adiz had built over Friday and Saturday. Derek was charged with domestic assault and the specific enhancement that applies when the assault is followed by deliberate misrepresentation to emergency services and to medical personnel. The charges were documented. The footage was in evidence. Cassandra was out of the house by Friday evening and at my home with Marcus and Lily, and she has not been back to that house since, and she will not be going back. Marcus was 4 and Lily was 2, and neither of them was old enough to understand what was happening in the specific terms that adults understand it, and both of them were old enough to feel the disturbance in the world around them, and to need the particular reassurance that comes from physical proximity to someone safe. Cassandra and the children were in the 2 spare bedrooms of my house, and for the first week, I was up multiple times a night because Lily did not sleep through the night reliably, and because Marcus had questions that he asked in the dark at 3 in the morning in the way that 4-year-old boys have questions, directly and without preparation, and that required direct and honest and age-appropriate answers. I answered every question. I made breakfast every morning. I drove Marcus to his preschool every day that week because the consistency of the routine was the most useful thing I could offer him, and because the drive gave us 12 minutes twice a day that were just the 2 of us, and that I tried to make feel ordinary even though nothing about the week was ordinary. Lily sat in my lap in the evenings after dinner with the complete unself-consciousness of a 2-year-old who has found a safe place and has decided to occupy it fully. I held her and I thought about Cassandra at 2 years old in the same kind of chair, and about her mother who had died 9 years earlier and who I wished with an intensity that surprised me after all this time could have been here for this. Not for the crisis, but for the morning coffee and the children in the kitchen, and the particular solidarity of 2 parents who love the same person deciding together that she is going to be okay. The case moved through the legal system with the efficiency that well-documented cases move through when the evidence is clear and the representation is strong. Derek entered a plea 4 months after the arrest that included a conviction on the domestic assault charge and a civil protection order that established a legal framework governing his contact with Cassandra and the children. Adiz managed the civil side of the proceedings in parallel, including the divorce filing and the custody arrangement and the financial settlement. The custody arrangement gave Cassandra primary custody with supervised visitation for Derek under conditions that Officer Chen's unit had recommended and that the family court judge had adopted without modification. The financial settlement addressed the house, the accounts, the vehicles, and the various other elements of a 3-year marriage in a way that Adiz described as strongly favorable to Cassandra, given the totality of the documented circumstances. I will not specify the amounts because they are Cassandra's private information. I will tell you that Cassandra and the children are in a house of their own now, a 3-bedroom in a neighborhood 15 minutes from mine, and that the house has a security system that Howard installed on the day they moved in, and that I monitor from my home office every morning with the same quiet attention I have brought to everything for 69 years. The system is thorough. The cameras are placed correctly. Nobody who means harm to my daughter or her children is going to enter that house without the full documentation of their entry existing before I make a single phone call. I want to speak directly to the parents watching this who have a concern about the safety of someone they love and who are sitting with that concern and managing it through the combination of hope and helplessness that is the most common response to a situation you can see developing but cannot yet prove. I want to tell you several things, and I want to tell them plainly. First, concern is data. When your body and your mind are generating concern about another person's safety, that concern is produced by observation and pattern recognition and the accumulated knowledge of a relationship, and it deserves to be taken seriously as information even before it can be confirmed as fact. Second, preparation is not overreaction. Installing a camera system in my daughter's home 3 weeks before a Thursday phone call was not paranoia. It was the application of professional knowledge to a personal situation in the only way that would produce the kind of evidence that changes a legal outcome rather than simply a family conversation. Third, evidence changes everything. The difference between a situation where a man says it was an accident and a woman's word against his, and a situation where time-stamped footage from 2 angles captured at high resolution shows exactly what happened, is the difference between an outcome that protects the victim and an outcome that protects the perpetrator. Evidence closes that gap. Documentation is the most powerful tool available to the people who are trying to protect someone. Use it. Fourth, the right professionals matter enormously. Adiz Osai and Officer Patricia Chen were the right professionals for this situation, and finding them required having relationships and networks that I had built over a career and a lifetime. If you do not have those relationships, build them before you need them. Call an attorney before there is a legal emergency. Introduce yourself to the resources in your community before you are in crisis. The time to build the network is not when you need it. Cassandra is doing the work that people do after a situation like this, in therapy, in the slow reconstruction of a self-understanding that has been distorted by years of being in proximity to someone who treated her as less than she was. In the daily practice of being in a house where the atmosphere is not managed by someone else's mood, and where her children can be children without the specific vigilance that children develop when their home is not reliably safe. She is not finished. She will not be finished for a long time, and finished is not the right frame anyway, because this is not the kind of thing that has a finished. It has an ongoing. She is doing the ongoing with the determination and the intelligence and the directness that she has always had, and that has been suppressed for 3 years by a man who needed her smaller than she was. She is not smaller than she is anymore. She comes to dinner on Sunday evenings, and she brings the children, and we eat, and we talk, and Marcus tells me about preschool with the specificity of a child who has decided his grandfather is interested in every detail, and who is correct about that assessment. Lily sits in my lap. The security system feeds to my phone on the counter, and I check it once during dinner, and not again until the following morning, because once during dinner is sufficient, and because the rest of the evening belongs to the people at the table. That is the balance I have found. Vigilance and presence, both at once. My father would have understood that. He wired buildings for 38 years and came home every evening and was present in the way that matters most. I am trying to do the same. My name is Leonard Graves. I am 69 years old. I built a security company over 26 years and sold it and retired and thought I was done with the professional application of what I knew about cameras and evidence and the documentation of what actually happens in the spaces where people live. I was not done. The most important installation of my career happened on a Tuesday afternoon in my daughter's house with Howard Reese beside me, and 3 weeks of quiet monitoring that followed, and a Thursday phone call that I drove to in 11 minutes, and a hospital room where I held my daughter's hand and told her I had everything. I had everything. I want to be clear about what everything means. Everything means footage and timestamps and cloud storage, and an attorney who had it by 9 in the morning, and a detective who had it by 2 in the afternoon, and a legal structure that was already in motion before Derek Simmons finished his coffee in the hallway of Mercy Regional. Everything means that when a man stages an accident and calls it an accident and expects the story to hold because it has held before, the camera saw everything and the camera does not lie, and the camera was placed there by a father who was not going to let hope substitute for preparation. The camera saw everything. Everything changed. My daughter is in her own house 15 minutes from mine. Her children are safe. The security system is running. I check it every morning. That is enough. That is everything. If this story reached something in you, leave a comment. Tell me where you are watching from. If you know someone who needs to hear this, share it without asking. Subscribe if you have not already. There is always more to come.